Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm your host, Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com, and today we'll be talking to Lance Falk. I'm joined by Wendy BRYDGE, Cameron Bates, and Lance Falk. And before we get started, Lance, can you tell us a little bit about the time that you dressed up like, I believe it was Huckleberry Hounds?
Oh, okay. Well, when I first started at Hanna-Barbera, I was in the stock room, and for extra money, I would do costume. I was willing to put on a character costume and go to a mall or go to, I did a parade. I went down to Joe Barbera's house in Palm Springs and did a segment for 60 minutes, and they cut us out. But one time I was, there were 3 Hanna-Barbera stores. One was in Westwood, one was in the studio itself, and one was in, if you know California at all, kind of south of the airport down in the beach cities. And there was a mall, there's still a mall, it's one of the biggest in the world, called the Del Amo Mall. And while it's itself in a nice neighborhood, it's adjacent to East LA, which is real gang infested hellhole kind of area. And so the mall would get a lot of, I guess you'd call gang kids, and a lot of trouble there in the mall. And so the cops would go around 2 by 2, with big guns. And one day I was there at the mall we're in a Huckleberry Hound costume, in front of the store, running around. And my friend Joanne Miller was doing Betty Rubble. And Huck had a pretty loose, baggy suit with giant foam feet, but a hard fiberglass helmet. So I was just sitting there, and these guys, these gang members, peeled around behind me, but towards Betty, but on the way, one of them cracked me in the back of the head, like as really hard. And it was like a fiberglass helmet. It just rang like a bell, like a cartoon. And I just had this moment, and then I saw these guys heading for Betty. And before I could even think about it, because that moment when you're smacked and you tense up and you don't think, I saw him heading for Betty. And right now I'm like 60 and I'm overweight. Then I was like 22 and I was slim and fit and took judo and all this stuff. So I saw these guys heading towards Betty, and I screamed, "Hey!" And by the time the guys turned around, and they almost got her and they were reaching for her, I was up to a good run, and I jumped in the air and I planted my rubber foot about that big right in the middle of the guy's chest. And these are like tattooed gangbangers, and I sent his ass down the freshly waxed floor of this shopping mall, spinning, just whoa, 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 whoa. And his friends are rushing after him. And as I hit him with my whole weight with his giant foot, like boom, like right there. So it'd be like getting hit with a bag or something. So everything happened kind of in slow motion, like the movie Battleship Potemkin. Everything happened in slow motion. I saw the security guards coming towards us, drawing their guns. I saw the gang guy on the ground reaching in his shirt for God knows what. I saw my handler, who was a big guy named Mark Ashley, who did the costume stuff. And I saw him heading toward me. And the guy's friends saw the security guards. So he wasn't even off his butt yet, and they just grabbed him and started pulling him away. And he was furious. And his feet were like kicking on the ground, but he was, but they were pulling him, and they pulled him out of side door. And the guards kind of went after him. And so basically, my handler said, "You better get out of here. Those guys might be waiting for you." So I kind of got dressed and I went out another door. And the funny part of the story, if you think about it, is, of course, later on in the clubhouse, they're like, "Hey, that big cartoon dog kicked your ass," And if you think about it, this guy, I ruined this guy's life because his gang members, fellow gang members, saw like a blue cartoon dog beat him up. And you can't bounce back from that. He probably became really touchy when anyone bugged him about it, and then he snaps one day and he's impotent, and his girlfriend leaves him. I'm sure I caused all that to happen. I'd like to think of that. I'd also like to think that cartoon characters became cool, and so they're getting like yogi tattoos and so anyway, that's a little true to Lance adventure.
That's great.
Love it.
So
Love it.
I gotta have somebody draw that up one day. It was like a little one-page comic.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
So
that would be really
there you
fun.
go. And I talked to Joanne the other day. I talked to Betty Rubble the other day. I found her on Facebook and told her I was going to tell that story, and she says, "Oh, that was so funny." And went, well, at the time, I thought it was going to be killed, but the guy was going for his gun or something. But that would have been no way to get into Valhalla. Being shot in a mall by wearing a Huckleberry Hound costume. Nah, we're not going to let
Oh my gosh.
That's not a warrior's death, my friend. So
Let's get into our questions. Can you tell us about how and when you got started doing art, and walk us through your career?
okay, well, I'll try not to be too long-winded about it because there's a lot there. I was always interested in cartoons and art. I took a real liking to Jonny Quest when I was a little kid, as kind of blowing my little mind, like that and original Star Trek and original airing really, and Disneyland, like all three of those things really blew my mind quite a bit. And I grew up in San Francisco, and I moved to LA in 1980. And I really had Star Wars fever too at that time, because you can imagine, that's when the first two movies were out. And I haven't really liked any of the Star Wars movies since the second one, but that's me. So I moved to LA with some friends, and in science fiction club I was in, and we moved into this nice big house. And all four of us are in the business in some way. Two are prop masters for live action, like famous live action projects. One's a really renowned voice actor, animation voice actor. And we're all still really close friends. And one of them at the time was working in the Hanna-Barbera stock room or in the mail room, because he knew a girl that worked there. He went to school with her, and her mom worked there. It's all about knowing somebody. And he called me up. I was at Bullock selling suits and TVs terribly in my early 20s. And he called me up and said, "Hey, Lance, they just fired the stock boy. So get over here." So I went over there, I talked my way in. I was a Hanna-Barbera stock boy, moving water bottles and changing light bulbs and getting animation paper punched, holes punched and things. And in 5 months, I got out of that and I became a PA. And then I went to the accounting department as a gopher. And right around then, I heard they were doing new Jonny Quests. And I was like, I've got to work on that. And I wrote a bunch of ideas just on line paper and handwritten. And I went to the story editor, and he said, "Well, we only have 13 and they're already assigned, and you've never done it before. But," he said, "I did read it, and you know how to write a Jonny Quest story. You understand the characters. So, keep at it." And he was real nice and encouraging. And so I went, okay, that's a dead end. I'll try drawing. And I found out that they needed a cleanup artist who would take a rough drawing, light table it, and do a nice, clean, crisp, reproducible pencil line. And that was a way of, like, if you have a character designer, rather than have them draw it rough and then draw it clean, you can have them do twice as many roughs. So that way you get a lot more value out of really good designers. So they have cleanup people to do that kind of work. And the artist that was doing the roughs that they wanted to keep going, his name is Tony Segroy. And Tony Segroy worked on the original Jonny Quest as a layout guy. And on this 1984 version, he was doing character design. And Tony is a very unsung hero of mine, but also of animation. He was working World War II for Chuck Jones on cartoons. He was an absolute, one of the most talented artists I've ever met. And like you all know Ewo. I would say that there are 3 people I know that are on the Ewo level, and Tony's one of them. And there's another guy named Don Morgan, who passed recently, who's another friend of mine. I say those 3 guys could draw anything in any style perfectly. And Tony was just a guy, he never wanted any kind of supervisor job. He never wanted any responsibility. He just wanted to be given a list and go through the list. And so not a lot of people know about Tony, but he could have gone on to be a great art director or show creator, but he just didn't have any interest in that. So I heard they needed someone to clean up Tony's stuff. So this is all going somewhere, trust me. Okay, so I heard they needed someone to clean up Tony's stuff. And I thought, well, the best way to prove I can do this job is to get some of Tony's stuff and clean it up. And for that show. So the problem was, if you ask and they say no, you're kind of screwed. And so he kept his door locked. And at the time, you couldn't even, our Xerox department, there were no Kinkos then. This is like 1986. There are no Kinkos, there's no place you could really get photocopies. We had a photocopy department, of course, and they ran it like with Dutch doors, and you go up to them and you hand them something and give them a charge number. Then they would copy it for you and write it on a chart. So that was a dead end. So what I realized I had to do was break in Tony's office and steal his artwork over the weekend. So being a stock boy, I went down to the basement. I got a ladder. I went into the hallway where his locked door was. I went up through the acoustic ceiling. I popped the panel off. I climbed hand over hand. Now, can you hear the Mission Impossible music? Because you should. So I'm going hand over hand, and then I move his ceiling up, and I drop in like a cat. And then, all right, now I'm in Tony's room. There's his artwork. And I take a mental picture of where everything is. We don't have camera phones, you know, take a mental picture of everything. And I grab everything and I put it in a folder. I grab like a dozen drawings and dust a little bit, because I let a little dust down, and reset the ceiling, and went out the hallway and reset the ceiling and put the ladder in the basement. And this on a Friday night. And I went home and I made a light table out of, got a glass coffee table, some tape, and a lamp with the top off. And all weekend, while my roommates are all like, hey, we're going to this party and we're going to this concert, we're going to, no, I'm drawing. So I just around the clock for 2 days, I cleaned up Tony's drawings over and over, the originals, over and over and over and over, until finally, that's about as good as they're going to get. And then Skip, who was the roommate who was in the mailroom, knew Tony. He said, well, you know, Tony works from like 10 in the morning till 2 in the morning. He's like, not, or 2 in the morning till 10 in the morning. It's like Nosferatu. And he works these weird hours. And I was like, oh God. And I jumped out of my seat and put everything in the folder and hopped in my little MGB and zipped across town and got the ladder out of the basement and opened the ceiling and crawled, you know, did everything again. And then when I was driving out of the parking lot, I'm driving out and Tony's driving in, boom, like that. We just,
oh my God.
And they're looking at me like, he looked at me like, if you know the movie Psycho, when the main character sees the guy walk in front of her and he said, what are you doing here? You know, kind of thing. And it was just like that moment. So I leave, I go home, and I'm relaxing. And then the next day I go into, you know, I sleep like 3 hours, and I go into work, and I go to a fellow named Jim Stenstrom. And if you're up on your Scooby stuff, Jim is a character designer, and he was a director of the first DTV for direct-to-videos. And he is a character designer on all sorts of versions of Scooby over the years. He's done lots of Scooby artwork. And Jim was a comic book writer in the 70s, but then he was doing that stuff. And I went to Jim and I said, hey, Jim, I hear you're looking for a cleanup guy. And he says, yeah. Well, I did some cleanups on Tony. You want to look at him? And, I didn't even know you drew. Okay. And he's thumbing through them. And he says, yeah, I guess he's good enough. And I was like, yeah. When can you quit that job? And I said, right now. Oh, okay, great. Well, I said, but I'm not in the union. Oh, they'll call you. They'll want your money. But and I wasn't ready for success. I wasn't. He would just say, yeah, you're in. And he said, don't worry about it. If you fuck up, I'll fire you. And like, oh, all right. So that's when I started. And it was the '84 version of Jonny Quest. And I went from there to a show called Pound Puppies. And I went from just doing like cleanup and light prop design and things. I went from Jonny Quest to Pound Puppies to this, to that. And then pretty soon there was a head of the department named Jack, and I became his assistant. So I worked on like every show HB did a little bit for about 10 years. So I would tend to clean up the main model packs, which is why you see my name on all sorts of things that I might have only done like an episode of, but I got it started. I would cast which artists were best on which projects and how to balance that. And did that for a while. And after about 10 years of being Radar O'Reilly, mainly, who was like the assistant to the head guy, but the assistant really was doing all the work. After about 10 years of that, I was really excited about what Warner Brothers was doing with Tiny Toons and the upcoming Batman show. And I loved Hanna-Barbera and I loved everyone there, but the shows weren't very good at that time. And I kind of wanted to work on good shows. So I actually quit. I took a cut and pay and I went over just to draw. And in the first year, I worked on Animaniacs. The first year there, I probably learned more about actual drawing than I did at 10 years at Hanna-Barbera, because I was drawing all day, every day. And the standard was a lot higher. And the notes were really helpful. And I was mentored. And God, and from then on, I just bounced around to a lot of different studios doing different things, mainly props. I work a lot with Jim Stenstrom, who's the guy that hired me. I found a producer in Davis Doy, who I loved working with, and he found me very valuable. He hired me as a color key guy, and I had to learn Photoshop. He actually knew I was interested in writing, and he hired me as a writer on 2 different shows and a Scooby movie called Alien Invaders. I'm sure you know, that we co-wrote. I kind of plotted it, and then he and I split the scenes up and wrote it. The last job I had was I was working for 6 months on Curious George for Davis with Jim. Jim was the character guy and I was the prop guy, and Davis was the producer. So we always liked working together, although Davis and Jim are now retired, I believe. So currently I am doing props, character cleanup, effects design, and there are 4 things I forgot. Oh, and background cleanup on a show called Solar Opposites, which is kind of a spin-off of Rick and Morty. So I worked on Rick and Morty a little bit, then I went over to their sister show, Solar Opposites, and I'm working on that for another couple of weeks, and then I got to look again, because that's how the business is. So that's my career and how I broke in to the business.
Nice. Literally. Was it difficult to make the transition from artist to writer, and how did you get into writing?
Well, what I discovered about writing right away was it's 100% political, not 99, not you're really good so you'll get work, or you're really bad, you won't get work. Every job I did not get writing, and I tried for years and years at Warner Brothers, was because I wasn't friends with the right person. And every job I did get was because I was friends with the right person. And it was usually Davis. And people seem to like this stuff. So I think there's nothing, like, the only reason he hires you as his friend. I mean, I deliver the goods, but it just became, I never had a connection. So I was banging my head against the wall. And I even got to pitch to Next Generation in the second season. And they laughed me out of there because my stuff was too much like the original series, which I think it needed. But Davis knew I was interested in writing. So he included me in all the planning meetings for a show called SWAT Cats. And again, SWAT Cats has all those Scooby alumni. It has Glenn Leopold, David Stoy, Jim Stenstrom, myself as kind of a core of 4 people. And so how Hanna-Barbera had been structured is that the writers were over here and they were autonomous to the producers who would create the artwork. And the producers had to take whatever script was given to them verbatim. And we had a new head of production at Hanna-Barbera, a fellow named Fred Seibert. And Fred did not like that rule. And he said, if a producer is responsible for how the cartoon comes out, he also ought to be in charge of the writers. And the day that rule changed, I sold 4 scripts. So did I get really good overnight, or did the rules change so I was allowed to write? And so when it was up to Davis, I sold 4 scripts. And it was up to anyone else in the writing department, like, yeah, you draw though. So you go over there and draw stuff. And they're being very insular about it. And Warner Brothers, even though I'd finally written shows at Hanna-Barbera, I went over to Warner Brothers and banged my head against the wall repeatedly. And they're like, yeah, you draw props. And I could never crack that again. In fact, there's the dent from banging my head. So the transition was easy when I had an ally. And it's impossible without one, impossible. And I know a lot of people that have the same story. I know a lot of artists that have great story instincts and great writing ability, and they're all shut out. Because those writers, that's a little club of guys. Whether you like their work or don't like their work, they're a little club. And you can't get in that club, especially if you can draw. They really don't like that, because that means you can do your job and their job. And so you're a tremendous threat. And I don't mind going on the record saying that. So.
You worked on Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, and Cyber Chase. And I believe you had different things that you worked on throughout those movies.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the process from start to finish in creating the movies?
Sure. Well, Zombie Island came about because for a little while, we were a little development group. Davis and Jim and myself were a little development group coming up with show ideas. And we come up with what I thought were really great show ideas that were ignored or thrown away. And so one day, management came to us and said, you know what? We were polling mothers in supermarkets, and they all seem to know who Scooby-Doo is. And we want to get into the direct-to-video market. So why don't we do a direct-to-video Scooby-Doo? And I believe, and you could probably tell me better, that this is really the first long-form Scooby-Doo anything. I think they did some hour-long movies with celebrities, but until then, like a real straight-up feature-length thing, like a 70-minute thing. I said, just do that. And they didn't expect much to come of it. And we did Zombie Island, and it was a much bigger hit than anyone anticipated. And Davis ran it, Glenn wrote it, Jim designed the characters and directed it. And then I was kind of like an ancillary to everybody. I would do all the color art for the presentation. I would do pass on the script. I would do a pass on the characters, just all sorts of little, that's how I like to work. I like to be involved in kind of all aspects, and just keep the production moving slowly. And when Davis and Jim are out of town, I'm nominally in charge, because I know where all the pieces are. And so there was sort of, I didn't really have an official title. I was kind of so they'd stick me as a character designer, which I didn't really do, or an associate producer, which I kind of really, you know, so it was a little amorphic. But you know, Jim and Davis would tend to plot the stories together, and then Glenn could bang a script out. He's the fastest writer I've ever met. Glenn could bang a really good script out. And then while he's writing, he would just say, listen, in this, we're going to need Civil War zombies. We're going to need this. We're going to need this. So Jim would start drawing even before the script was done. And we'd all pitch in on that. And then it just went through the usual production method of a half-hour show, only it was longer. Only it was like 3, 2, 4, 6, like 4 half-hour shows. I guess you have specific questions, but we did the first one. It did really well. It did so well that management decided they could help us and dumped a script on us that we didn't write that had a lot of problems because, you know, well, oh, now it's successful. So they want to attach themselves to it. And that was problematic, but we got it done. And then they left us alone for the third one, which I co-wrote with Davis. And well, they left us alone. And then the fourth one, they were like, they dumped the worst script any one of us had ever read, was a Cyber Chase. And I don't even want to go into it too deeply, but it was so contentious that we never did another one because they basically bumped us out of writing jobs that we'd earned with not only somebody else, but somebody who had never done it before. And it was really amateurish and very problematic and not easy to produce in any way. And we just sort of like, fine, you know, and scattered to the four winds and ended up doing different things. And Davis pulls us back in once in a while and, you know, and that's sort of that. So we handed off the Scooby movies. There was a guy named Scott Gerald who did them after us. And he lasted 3 or 4, and then somebody else did 3 or 4. And then a guy named Joe Sitka did a bunch. And I ended up doing props for him on one called Sword of the Samurai, just kind of coming in. And then he thought he was going to be doing a whole bunch of, and something about the Scooby movies, they couldn't let anyone do more than 3 or 4 before firing the whole crew and getting another crew. Because, well, Scooby's a star and they don't want anyone to get too much power there or something. So that was that. Now, the thing about Scooby is they're always on a double track. They are both doing a TV series and direct-to-video movies. And the TV series, they experiment. I don't know if you noticed that, but they're really kind of Shaggy and Scooby Get a Clue and Mystery Inc. and Be Cool. And all those shows are kind of odd, but the movies are pretty straight Iwo Takamoto designs. And the other, I guess, Warner Brothers thing I have to say is that they inherited Hanna-Barbera, which has 300 great properties, and they only do Scooby-Doo. And that's the, like they inherited all of DC. We're doing Batman, you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with those things, but you know, you got a whole library back there and they're just ignoring the library because the housewives didn't check those other things when they did the list years ago. He said, well, whenever we do something that isn't Scooby or Batman, it doesn't sell as well. Well, one isn't going to change the trend. You have to inveigle Wacky Races or Flintstones or something in the public consciousness again. You can't just ignore something for a long time, come out with a thing and then pull it away again for it to gain any traction, if that makes any sense. So so it's Scooby, Scooby, Scooby. So luckily you guys, the Scooby fans, they're going to be feeding you as long as they think they can make a buck with it. And if they want to hire me, and I'm available, I'll help them out. And that's sort of that. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. If you ever work on another Scooby thing, just know that we would like to see Scrappy, Scooby Dum, and Scooby D come back.
Yeah.
Just in case you ever work on it.
Well, that's fair enough. What I wanted, one of my pet ideas I wanted to do is Hanna-Barbera was better at ripping off Scooby-Doo than anybody. And so there are all sorts of shows like Goober and the Ghost Chasers and Funky Phantom and the Clue Club and all these shows that are kind of built on the Scooby model. And I always thought it'd be fun to have a contest, like an Olympics between these mystery gangs, you know, Jabberjaws. It's all, instead of a dog, it's a this, instead of a dog, it's a that. And so I thought that'd be a fun show. And yeah, Scrappy-Doo can be the villain behind everything, you know, if you want, but
No, we don't want him to be the villain anymore. No.
Well, one thing as time goes by is I have outgrown kind of disliking stuff by thinking it's bad. And I realize that almost everything is somebody's favorite thing and it's sacred to them. And it just didn't hit me at the right age. But when something came out, that was the ultimate thing. And there's a whole period in the 80s, I wasn't watching cartoons. I was a teenager. I was trying to get dates and things where like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Ninja Turtles, they're kind of all toy-based shows in the 80s. I am completely colorblind to those shows because I just didn't grow up with them or care about them. But 10 years earlier, it would have been a different batch of things. And 10 years later, it would have been a different batch. But after that period, I was in the business and I started paying attention and getting involved again. But there was a period between the time I was a kid and the time I was a professional that I just like, yeah, whatever, He-Man, whatever's going on, you guys enjoy that, but I'm not the audience for that. I felt that about Star Trek. Originally, I thought, I only think the original show is good. And then I came to realize, no, it's just the subsequent shows are for a different audience than me. They're kind of more touchy-feely and more, you know, they have different values to them than a straight-up cowboy and space action show. But those other shows have as bigger an audience than as the one I liked. And I kind of had to come to terms with, Lance, not everything is made for you. You know, there's a lot of demographic out there and you just have to appreciate it. And I will tell you this last thing on that subject is, I feel really strongly about something, is when you're in charge of a property that's gone on before, you have an absolute adamant obligation to honor that property, to, even if you don't like it, you're not making it for you, you're making it for the fans of that thing. And a disastrous example is Zack Snyder hates Superman. And look what he did to Superman. He ruined it as a character. He murders and he cries all the time and he doesn't care about people. And it's like, that's because Zack Snyder feels that way about that character. And so you can't be Zack Snyder. You have to, I show up and let's say I'm not the biggest Scooby-Doo fan, but I had to become the biggest Scooby-Doo fan. And I had to examine what you guys want and what you're expecting. And yeah, I'm going to put a little me in there and I'm going to put a little, some modern elements in it, but I cannot violate what it is because it's not my toy. I'm only getting to play with the toy. And then at some point I'm going to return the toy to the toy box and I cannot break the toy because somebody else is going to play with it. And if you break a toy like Superman got broken, it's really hard for the next person to make Superman a credible character anymore because now he's a murderer. And so I feel really, really strongly about that. I call the word is stewardship. You're the steward of that thing and you have to be responsible to that thing. And you have to love that thing, even if you don't love it. In a way, I feel like The Mandalorian, if any of you watch that, these are the first real stewards of Star Wars. Even beyond George Lucas kind of lost his way. And these are the guys that saw that first movie and that second movie and grew up loving those and not liking any of the others, like myself. And so The Mandalorian feels exactly like the first Star Wars movie that I fell in love with in 77, because they're stewards of the property. I feel like a lot about the very, very new Star Trek shows feel to me more like the classic version of the show than any of the subsequent versions. And you can like anything you want, but they're finally appealing to me where they hadn't been in decades, because they feel like the ones I grew up with. And so in my mind, like, oh yeah, they're stewards of the property. They like the same things and they pulled from those same influences. Mandalorian is all about doing a spaghetti Western and doing a samurai movie and all those things that George originally was inspired by before he became a guy who came up with toys, you know. So, end of sermon.
Yeah, amen to that. We very much agree with you with everything that you just said.
Oh, thank
We
you.
have been very disappointed in how Warner Brothers has been treating Scooby lately, in that we really feel like they don't care what the fans like or want, and they are just going to disrespect our franchise because they can. And we really don't like it.
And they're sort of like, it's like, here's your Scooby, shut up, you know, kind
Yeah.
of thing. And I felt like when I saw those last 3 Star Wars movies, which were just a mess. Here's your Star Wars, just buy the toys and shut up. And we're going to do a theme park area in the theme park, and it's all going to be based on Kylo Ren and Rey and all this. And I say, where's effing Darth Vader? You know, like, where's Luke? Where's Leia? And Luke and Han and Leia, I don't know if you noticed this, but the new movies, they were miserable. Luke was a hermit on an island, and Han and Leia had split up, and they had a crazy son who was killing people. And I was like, you know, you can't get me to love your characters while you're crapping all over my characters. You know, it's if you want to ignore them, that's fine, but to actually expect me to love these new guys while abusing my friends, it's not going to happen. So there you go. Scrappy-Doo lives. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, okay, all right. To play fair, like, Scrappy-Doo is part of the mythos. I'm not crazy about comedic sidekicks per se. However, you have to be a steward, you know, and if Scrappy-Doo is part of it, you got to bite your tongue and like give them the best Scrappy-Doo you can, if that's part of the thing. Of course, there's enough Scooby without him where you can get away with it. But if somebody, for example, somebody said, you're going to have to put Scrappy-Doo in this, I would honor that commitment, honor that character. I wouldn't use him as the butt of a joke, you know, because I don't like him, kind of thing. So there you go.
Cameron, you have some questions for Lance?
I do, yes. So I actually have 3 questions for you. My first one is, and just right off the gate, do you foresee a Jonny Quest and Scooby-Doo movie? And the reason I ask you is because I know you loved Scooby-Doo and Jonny Quest.
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo is my #1 cartoon, but Jonny Quest is my number 2 cartoon. So I love Jonny Quest, and I mean, they've done a comic between Jonny Quest and Scooby-Doo, but I would love to see a movie. Do you foresee one?
Well, I will say this, that the only way under current management circumstances you will ever see Jonny Quest is if they do that. If they incorporate him in a Scooby-Doo movie. It is not impossible. Remember, they were in a Tom and Jerry movie, and I worked on that a lot. I did a lot of work on that.
Awesome.
And the producer of that was a fellow named Spike, who's a great guy over there doing great work with the Tom and Jerry characters and comedy characters. And Spike was trying for years to do something with Jonny Quest, and they finally said, well, if you can fit him into a Tom and Jerry movie, you can do Jonny Quest. And that was the only way. He would have done it straight if he could have, but at the time, Tom and Jerry movies were all about Tom and Jerry meet Robin Hood, Tom and Jerry go to Oz, Tom and Jerry meet Sherlock Holmes. So they meet a character, they kind of go behind the scenes of the story and they motivate the story along. And you, in a way you never knew, like in Robin Hood, they were manipulating arrows and getting a message back from the king and all these things. And Robin Hood is not really aware of all these things, but if Tom and Jerry weren't there, the story wouldn't have played out. And so the idea here is that Tom and Jerry are kind of lost at sea, and the quest jet picks them up, and they communicate with Bandit because he's another animal, but the adults don't know that they can talk or anything more than a cat and a mouse. And so they have an adventure with him. And because it was a Tom and Jerry movie, we had to cartoon up the Jonny Quest characters because they're visiting the world. And if you did a Scooby-Doo thing, you'd probably have to design those characters to fit in Scooby. I would, as a purist, I would rather have a straight up Jonny Quest thing. But if the way to work on that character again were through a Scooby-Doo movie, I would be happy to do it. And I think the odds are not, they're not astronomical. The odds of doing a new Jonny Quest show are kind of astronomical against and Flintstones and any of that stuff. But through Scooby-Doo, it's a possibility. So.
And I agree with you. And, you know, it's funny. We were talking about this the other day. It's like they'll give, like, Warner Brothers is kind of like you said, like they got a whole library. Well, I noticed that Warner Brothers, they'll focus on certain cartoons like Scooby-Doo and Tom and Jerry, and they'll give them like official accounts on like social media, and they'll like do certain merch. But like you never see any Huckleberry Hound or Jonny Quest or any of these other great cartoons. Like they don't have an account for them. It's like, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm shocked that Warner Brothers does not feature Jetsons and the Flintstones as popular as they were back then. So
I couldn't even tell they won't. We did a Flintstone meet the WWE wrestlers, and that was the first Flintstone thing in 13 years. And I worked on that a lot. I did all the props, and I had the time in my life drawing that stuff and cleaned up all the characters. And I had a ball doing that show, and I could not care less about wrestling, but it didn't matter to me, you know, because I was really, really inveigled in the Flintstone-ness of it. And I thought it was actually a pretty good idea in that, you know, wrestling is kind of a Flintstone-y thing. These barefoot guys hitting each other with chairs, and it struck me as and Fred fancies himself a fight promoter, so he's trying to make money. And those are all very Flintstone things that work well. That's a really surprisingly good movie, but the wrestlers asked for that. The wrestlers did 2 Scooby movies, right? That you know about.
Yes. And
then they were the ones that requested Flintstones and Jetsons. Otherwise, those never would have been made unless the wrestler side of it. Hanna-Barbera or Warner Brothers did not pitch those. The wrestlers pitched them, and they were like happy to do more work with them. So that question number 2.
Yeah, well, I think it's official. I think we need to become wrestlers, guys, in order to get Warner Brothers to do what we want.
And I'm a big nerd. I'm not, you know, I'm a big nerd. I don't care about sports at all. So you can imagine when I think about fake sports, you know, but it was a real pleasure working on that, and I was fine with it.
Right on. Well, I got my second question for you. What was your favorite memory working at Hanna-Barbera's when you were working on Scooby-Doo?
Well, I would say probably just the process of writing and recording Alien Invaders. I felt really invested in that. And Davis is such a good guy, and he knows I'm, you know, have an art background. So what he would do is he would get artwork from the character designers and background designers, and bring me in his room, shut the door, and say, okay, what do you think? And you don't usually do that with writers per se. Writer turns his work and he's done with it, but Davis knew I was emotionally invested and also had artistic instincts. So he'd say, now, I'm not going to automatically do anything you say, but I want your input, and if I agree with it, I'm going to pass those notes along, kind of thing. And I had a few notes, but a lot of things are better than I envisioned them. We had a background designer on all those projects, named Drew Gentle or Andrew Gentle. He's also retired. But Drew did the backgrounds for every SWAT Cats I wrote, every Jonny Quest I wrote, and the Scooby movie. So basically everything I ever wrote professionally. And that guy never did a drawing I didn't think was better than what I envisioned when I was writing it. And Drew's a master and a good friend. And Drew, boy, I had nothing to say about his stuff. Jim's characters, I really had nothing to say about those. They were all really good. I was kind of the prop boy on those, so I like my own props, you know. But being involved in those, the recording sessions are a ball. I originally had, for Alien Invaders, I was kind of watching ER at the time, and I was thinking Noah Wyle would be a good type for the bad guy. And so they reached out to him and he wasn't available or didn't want to do it, or his agent didn't want him to do it or whatever. So we're like, oh, darn, we'll have to get Mark Hamill, you know, and I'm a guy that saw Star Wars like 100 times when it was out in theaters. So, and he is the nicest guy. He is the nicest guy. And he, of course, he's so good, as you know. But the Mark Hamill thing was the voice director said, now, Lance, when Mark comes in, you can't mention Star Wars. And why? Why? He doesn't like talking about it? He said, no, he won't shut up. And he got to get some work done, you know. And oh boy, I loved working with him. And I gave him a line that was like, he was the bad guy ultimately. He said, I would have gotten away with it too. And I started that line, but he's in a paddy wagon. And if you watch the episode, during the line, they slam the door on him. And he says, shut up, you, and doesn't even let him finish. And he was like, I didn't even get to finish the line, you know. And I said, yeah, that's my joke. Now I have a story for the actors out there. Is, of course, we have our regular cast. But in Alien Invaders, I was in on the casting for that. We had 10 other parts that were new parts for that show. And when I'm writing, I'm thinking like, this character is kind of a Janine Garofalo type. And this is kind of a, you know, an Ernie Hudson type and that sort of thing, and Noah Wyle type. But our voice director just has a great Rolodex, and she just calls in 10 people for every one of those parts. And we read them all, and we have a little meeting, and we decide which one of those 10 people we like the most. And the fact is, everyone came in and was perfect, every single person. And we could have cast that show 10 times over, and it would have been exactly the same. And everybody showed up. They were really nice, and they were personable and real professional, and they read a great job, and meaning you can do everything right, and your odds are like 1 in 10. And what are the equalizers? The equalizers are, well, we've worked with Mark before, and we like Mark, and he's Mark Hamill, and he was perfect. And so we're gonna, he won over 9 other people that could have done as good a job. And Lester, the old crazy guy, we had like comedy legends in there reading for that part. But we went with kind of somebody they worked with before. So my lesson to my point is, any actors out there that hear this, don't take it personal. The competition is too ridiculous. And boy, you need that connection. Just like me as a writer, you need that connection, because there is 10, 20, 100 times as many people trying to get that one spot that you're perfect for, but they're perfect for, and they know somebody. So I don't know if that's helpful or depressing.
Okay, and my third question for you is, when you're doing like a character design, like what goes through your mind to like, you know, make them so like make the characters like so likable and lovable by like the fans? Because like I'll be honest with you, sometimes when I watch a cartoon, if I watch 2 different ones and one's drawn a little bit better, or, you know, a little bit, you know, like likable, I tend to gravitate towards that, and I feel like other fans do as well. So what goes through your mind, like what, like to make a character likable, would you say?
You like all the shows now where everyone has big bug eyes? I'm kidding.
Me? Oh, okay.
And I'm working on a show like that, and it's a good show. But yeah, I can't wait for that fad to go away. But well, first of all, Cam, I'm not really a character designer. I never have been. I'm drawing wise. I leave that to the guys like Jim Stenstrom or Tony Segroy, who are so good at it. I do my best when I'm writing a character to have a type in mind. I communicate that. I'm lucky as a writer as I'm friends with the artists, which usually writers aren't. So usually they're very separate, church and state, but I'm in the art department. So when Jim is sitting down, he will talk to me and say, what were you thinking for this or this or this or this? So I'll give him what input I can. And then he does his thing, and it's always amazing. How to make them appealing? I would just say that it's a little combination of things. There's certain actors and certain personas I'm fond of. So I'll say, well, I'm saying this guy kind of reminds me of Jonathan Winters, but don't do Jonathan Winters, or Robin Williams, but evoke that character. As far as the appeal of something, that is really the style of the show and what people above us have decided is a style of the show. But when luckily, again, Jim Stenstrom has a very appealing style. So he can draw anything and it looks really charming and likable. I would just say, like, the secret is hire the right people and let them do their thing. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
There you go.
Do you have some questions?
Yes, so there's might be a little bit of overlap in something that you've already said, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So when it comes to designing a character for either a film or a series, how much detail about the production already exists before an artist formally designs the characters? Are you given like a general idea of what the character should be, either in appearance or in their character traits? How much of the final character design is the product of the artist that's drawing it?
Well, there are two scenarios. One is if you're doing something from scratch that's never been established. SWAT Cats is a good example. And we had development sessions of developing the main 3 or 4 characters with the creators of the show who could draw well, and with Jim and some other people. And we established the look of a show from those meetings, from those very productive creative meetings. And in those meetings, I created a few ideas that ended up being canon to the show, as did everybody in the room. When you're talking about something that's been established, like Scooby-Doo, that style is already there. So you can't really go off the rails as far as body proportions, how realistic, how detailed, how flat something is, how round it is. Like, you're not going to draw the same kind of character for the Flintstones as you are for Scooby, as you are for now, because Ewo does have a style and Scooby-Doo's his style. There are a lot of Ewo shows where you could interchange the characters because they're all kind of in that Ewo realm. Like the Bruce Timm Batman show is the same as the Superman show, same as Justice League, same as Batman Beyond. They're all in the realm where you could kind of like paper doll redress people and they would work. So it's really the style of the show. What kills me, in the day they did a Hanna-Barbera show called the Laugh Olympics, Laugh-A Olympics. And the Laugh Olympics was, let's throw all the characters in one show and they're all different teams and they're doing sports. And you would see these drawings of Shaggy next to Augie Doggy, which are 2 different universes style-wise. And it's just didn't seem to bug people. And if you even look at the Flintstones, you look at the guys, they're 3 heads tall, and the women are like 6 heads tall. And Fred could bite Betty's head off, because they're very different proportions. And the kids are a different style. The kids are kind of Ewo style. It didn't seem to bug people too much. So, you know, when it's moving and the dialogue's good and you have music, unless it's too crazy out there, people don't notice it as much as you might think. Remember that MTV show called Drawn Together? That was like a sitcom of different archetypes in animation, and there was a SpongeBob character and a Disney princess and a Betty Boop, and you know, and they were just there. So think of how different Snow White looks than the Seven Dwarfs style-wise. She looks fairly realistic, and they're very cartoony. So it's more flexible than you might think. Now, in my realm, if we were doing Jonny Quest, there's no screwing around with that. Like, they're realistic. But if Jonny Quest visits Tom and Jerry, as they did, we had to cartoon them up quite a bit, so they wouldn't stand out in a grotesque way, you know. So there you go.
Yeah. So Scooby-Doo and Arabian Nights, kind of an odd movie in the Scooby universe because it's kind of non-Scooby for a Scooby movie. So do you recall what the thinking was behind that film and why it really wasn't a story about Scooby at all?
I absolutely do, which might have surprising answers for you. One is that they just kind of wanted to do an Arabian Nights story because Aladdin was a big hit, and we have 1,001 stories to choose. And some executive said, well, we're going to do Aladdin with Yogi's the genie. And my thinking was, why do you want to do a thing that's going to be compared to a multi-million-dollar feature film? But I was like, that would be the last story I'd want to do, technically speaking. But no, we're doing. So that show had, that particular thing had a lot of weird, bad network interference or studio interference. It had some executives that were creatively challenged, I would say. And that might come back to bite me in the butt, or I think the main one's gone now. But in the Arab world, my understanding, and people can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, is that dogs are not popular as a pet in the Middle East or in the Arab community. They're considered unclean or something. Now, I might be wrong, but that was my understanding. And because we knew that, we were told to have that show sort of be approved and succeed in that part of the world. Scooby had to be under the blanket a lot of the time and kind of out of sight and downplayed as much as we could get away with downplaying him. So we're greenlit because it's Scooby, but then it's problematic because there's a dog in it. And so that's what happened. Now, I don't know culturally if that is a fact, but that's what we were told. So, so people can comment on that if they know better. That have come from the Middle East, but you know, that's my
that's very interesting. I never would have. It wouldn't have even crossed my mind that would have been.
But if you watch it, you'll see them go out of the way, because we did, to hide Scooby behind a tablecloth and back there and hardly show him and kind of acknowledge that Scooby was there, but that he was always too afraid to really show himself because they just didn't like it. Didn't want to see Scooby. So I look forward to seeing comments about that from someone that lived in that part of the world, if they like dogs or not, you know. Here you go.
So given your time with Iwa Takamoto, was he proud of his work with Scooby? Do you think that he was aware of just how much of an impact Scooby-Doo has had, not just on entertainment and pop culture, but kind of on the lives of people in general? I know I can speak for the three of us here that Scooby it's been a major, major part of our lives, and we would not be the people that we are today if we hadn't grown up with Scooby as Iwa drew him and as Hanna-Barbera imagined him, and how we would like to see him stay for all of eternity. Right. And would he be surprised to see Scooby still going so strong in 2021?
Well, I would say we were lucky enough to have Iwo and Bill and Joe around for a long time. And long after 1969, I believe they died in the 90s.
I think so.
And so they had decades of seeing how popular that character was and how well that character was doing, stronger than ever. And we were making our first movies with Ewo's help. And Bill and Joe were were more figureheads by then. But I would say that they were well aware. They had the opportunity to be well aware. Like Walt Disney was well aware of how popular Mickey Mouse was, because he'd been living with Mickey Mouse for decades as a phenomenon. So I know that he's probably Ewo's most famous creation. Ewo designed a lot of shows for that studio, but he's the character he's most closely associated with and the characters that he drew the most. And I know he loved doing it because that was his default style more than anything else. So all the answers are good answers, like yes, 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 and yes. And he wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't think so.
Mhm.
I think that's all the questions we have. Do you have any other stories you want to share with us, or anything that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I would say that ancillary to this, look for on YouTube, look for something called Jonny Quest Adventures in Animation. And you'll see a pretty good little mini documentary of me talking about the original Jonny Quest, which is my big love in animation. It's also on the Blu-ray or DVD, latest release of that, but you can go to YouTube and see it. The other thing, and it's me and Brad Bird and Alex Ross and me and a bunch of famous guys talking about how great Jonny Quest is. And there's another podcast called A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo. And if you look at really early episodes, like 3 and 4, I talk for 2-3 hours about the origins and specifics of the first 4 direct-to-video movies, warts and all, and I really get into it. So that's a good ancillary to this. I try to keep my stories unique to your podcast, but I think they might have my origin story there, but they didn't hear the Huckleberry Hound kicking the guy's ass story. That's my gift to you.
That's awesome.
So,
and I will post the links for all of those in the description of the video.
Fantastic. So it's been lovely meeting you all. And if you're ever out in California, I'll buy you a Scooby snack.
Sounds good.
We'll
And
take you
thank
up
you
on
so
that.
much
Good,
for
yes.
yeah. Thank you so much for answering our questions and taking time to just hang out with us. It's great to hear from the people that are working behind the scenes, because typically you get the credit, but people don't know who you are, and we want people to know who you are.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Nikki. Good luck to your on everyone's endeavors. And
Thank you.
in 2 weeks, I'll know what job I have.
Nice.
So,
Well, good luck to you, and hopefully
Yes.
it's something exciting.
thanks a lot. Have a good night.
You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A very special thank you to animation artist and writer Lance Falk, artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy BRYDGE, and Cameron Bates from Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. If you would like to support the Scooby Panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport. Video editing by Nikki Blake. Music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for another Scooby Panel.
Say hi and bye to.
Oh my goodness, you're so cute.
Aw.
Okay. All right. So you saw Odin. This is a Furiosa.
Oh my goodness, look at you.
Aw.
She's my little girl.
So
She just
sweet.
wanted to be on camera. That's all.
So
Oh
I love my pugs.
How many dogs do you have?
I have two. My rat name is Two Pug. I can have
Oh
two
my
of these.
gosh.
And there some very consistent things about my life is Disneyland, Mazda Miatas, and pugs. I tend to, they're always involved one way or the other.
I love it. Right on.